understand why there was all that traffic till he realised. I told him the A412 is closed because it's flooded.
Okay,
So
no problem. Okay, so meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. A recording of the public part of the meeting will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. Where remote participants join the meeting using Teams, please turn on cameras when speaking and use the hands up icon to indicate a question or comment. Turn microphones and cameras off when finished. Those in the chambers, please remember to switch off microphones on when speaking and speak directly into the microphone and turn off when finished. Would attendees in the chamber please switch mobile phones off or place them in silent mode. If you need to take a call, please leave the room and return when finished. Okay, starting with, any apologies for absence?
Yes, one has been received from Councillor Lovell, Chair.
Okay,
And I believe if the Chair is unable to show up before the meeting ends, we would include his apologies. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the minutes. So we have 4 lots of minutes. So hopefully everybody's read through them. Do we agree to sign off the meetings, of the minutes, sorry? Agree? Agree.
Historical.
Okay, any disclosure of interest?
None at this point, Chair.
Okay, any urgent business?
No urgent business, Chair.
Wonderful. Okay, so we'll start with the report. So we're starting with item number 6, draft statement of gambling licensing policy. So we'll
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Really, it is, as is presented to you this evening, we are required under the legislation to review our statement of gambling policy every 3 years. We are in that period again. And therefore, as part of the process of taking this through to basically full council, we always look to convene the licensing committee to review the proposed draft policy, to take any comments and questions, and obviously really just to assist the reports and the draft policy through to full council. We've been doing this a while now, scarily. I remember bringing this in. So this has been going on since 2005, and as I say, we are required to review and publish a new statement every 3 years. The last one was reviewed in 21, and the current policy took effect from January 2022. Basically, we're not looking to drastically change the policy. This is really a sort of legislative update for the elements that have changed or introduced by the Gambling Commission over the last 3 years. So there isn't any significant changes as a licensing authority. For those of you that sit on the licensing, the alcohol licensing committee, gambling has a different hierarchy. So actually, whereas the alcohol licensing puts the policy and the committee at the top of the hierarchy, gambling, unfortunately, we are lower on that hierarchy because actually we only look at the activity in the premises. There is already, in effect, personal licences and operator licences that have been issued by the Gambling Commission. So in effect, we are just focused and looking at those activities on the proposed premises. So our remit is slightly different. Not to say that's not important, but it is a slightly different remit. So we have recently gone out to consultation, and at section 5 there we received 2 as by way of response to the survey, and they are listed out in your report in full, so you can see what the responses were, and obviously not significant responses. We tend to get more discussion points about the moral requirements or moral stance on gambling, which unfortunately is not something that we can take into account. As detailed there at item 8, we will look to then update this with the new statistics that have been released since we went out to consult on the 25th of July and the 27th of July with regards to the gambling participation. and then we'll be looking to present the draft policy to full council in October. And I think really that's the very short synopsis. I'm here to take any questions. Also, Jenny has been dealing with the technical sides of pulling all of this together, so we're both here to take any questions, obviously receive any comments, and we can go from there. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll start with questions. Councillor Dave. Sorry, Dave, yeah, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a general query as regards the proliferation of betting shops and what they call slot machines, gaming. In the town centre itself, there seems to be quite a lot. I checked with planning and it says they can't really do anything about it because they don't have a planning policy. So we've got no real control over if another 5 or 6 wanted to open at town centre, we couldn't do anything about it.
Yes, you're quite right. So under the planning provisions as they were, and I know the provisions have changed recently, so any financial institution as was set up, so any old bank or building society that was established in the town centre could automatically be changed over without any form of planning permission to a gambling, so a bank or a building society or similar to that can just be transferred to a gambling establishment, and the council in effect would have no say in the matter. And actually, as I said earlier, the operator and the people operating on the premises have already received licences from the Gambling Commission. So our remit really is to look at the position of the premises and the particular conditions that would be applied to that type of premises, dependent on whether it's, won't be a casino, but it would be a AGC, Adult Gaming Centre, or a bookmakers, or whatever, to make sure that that premises actually could meet those requirements. And if the premises is suitable, and therefore the operator has already been licensed, then we are in a position where there is very little governance that we can bring to bear regards to that element. But the planning rules have changed, but I don't think it has changed significantly the stance. So I think they are, was it sui generis? So they have a class of their own. But again, there are limitations given that status as to what planning can bring to the table with regards to the control. What I would say is that certainly since the last review of the gambling policy, at that stage we had seen quite a reduction on the number of betting shops and gaming establishments. There had been a proliferation up to that point, but actually I think regards to competition and also some of the change of rules regards to split premises, we then saw quite a reduction, but that reduction has stabilised over the last 3 years, so we haven't seen a significant change on numbers, I don't believe, between the last policy and this one. I hope that helps.
Thanks for that, and I think I agree with the saturation policy. You can only have so many of these gaming establishments and betting shops because there's only a limited amount of people that actually want to lose their money, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I've certainly never been in one. I've been in betting shops, but I've not been in the gaming thing. You look through the window and there's one person sitting in the tank. So it's economics, and I think we've reached a saturation point, which helps.
Thank you. Councillor Chowdhury.
My comment was really around the consultation. We only had 2 responses back. Are we leaving ourselves open to criticism just because we had a very, very low response?
Regrettably, that is par for the course. We've done this over a number of different cycles now, every 3 years since 2005. And actually the numbers of responses have always been low, so probably less than a handful. So no, this isn't out of kilter, and no, we're not leaving ourselves vulnerable for challenge. We have gone out, we have put it out on the consultation portal, we have advertised it and put it on the website, etc. So we have looked at all avenues. It's just one of those areas of licensing which is probably more to do with a moral stance, and when people realise that that can't be taken into account, then the number of comments coming back is quite low.
Okay, Councillor Mead.
Looking at the paperwork you sent us, on page 24 it tells us that determination applications review regarding the proximity of gambling premises near schools, etc. And it finishes off, though, by saying proximity alone will not be sufficient grounds for the refusal, and each application will be determined on its own merit. Is that a bit of an oxymoron, or can we just say, no, you're too close to school on your bike?
Unfortunately, no, we can't. It can't just be on one item alone. There would have to be, we would have to evidence what we believed to be the issues. As you can imagine, you know, we can be challenged on those decisions, but basically, as with most licence types, it is on a case-by-case basis, and we are required as a licensing authority to look at that each and every case on its merits. The fact that the locality may change doesn't necessarily, as the policy sort of indicates, would be enough in its own right. It might be if we then have a whole range of evidence from the community, you know, listing concerns, etc., and if there is also existing issues that we think would not lend themselves to having an establishment in that location. So there is precedent out there on other licensing regimes to sort of say that actually locality can change, and therefore in that particular type of renewal can be refused. In this case, obviously the licenses are issued for the lifetime of the premises. So for this, if there was evidence to demonstrate that the council had serious concerns with regards to the locality because it's changed or whatever, then we could consider that. But you'd normally expect one or more, well, more than one, should I say, element to come into play to make a refusal.
Okay, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. I was looking at on page 4, on the licensing objectives. Whilst I fully understand we're not allowed to use moral judgments and take moral issues into account, are we able to consider anything to do with health issues, i.e. perhaps looking at measures to try and reduce gambling addiction? Could that be taken in some ways? Are we able to look at measures, and could we add that to objectives, because it's not going against any of the other aspects?
Thank you, Councillor. No, the issue is, again, that the objectives are set out by the legislation, so we are limited. So very unfortunate, as you've experienced in the alcohol licensing regime, there are limitations there, and we have the same issues about public health. What I can reassure you is that actually we are working quite hard with public health to look at the gambling harms, and actually we've been encouraged them to look along the same lines of alcohol and drugs harms, and we think that this should be considered in the same way, and I think there's probably correlation out there. One of the projects that we'd like to progress in the not too distant future is to have some assessments being undertaken with regards to gambling harms in Luton, and we will be working with our colleagues in public health to look at that. So that is something that is ongoing. We've just had quite a proliferation of policy documents coming through recently, as you're probably aware, on a range of different licence types. So we're looking to clear those because we are statutorily required, for instance, like this, to get this through, be ready for January next year. But we are progressing that with our colleagues across the various teams to look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor James Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. My point's mainly around the gambling harms and the research done around that. Because I know on item 6 it sort of says that it notes a survey from GamCare, but that is actually industry funded by the Gambling Committee, and would be sceptical around climate change research from the oil industry or smoking research from the cigarette industry. So I'm just wondering where we are citing a piece of research where it is an industry funded body, that we make that clear, that industry funded do this, because I think although their research may not be complete without merit, it does need the proviso that this has come from a specific viewpoint where they're trying to protect an interest, I think.
Yeah, we can certainly take that into account and reference that, just to suppose to make it clear with regards to any assessment that we then carry out would not be directly linked with GamCare. We would look for an independent assessment or assessors to come in and undertake that work for us, so it wouldn't be industry-led in any way.
Okay, Councillor Keynes.
Thank you. First of all, I'm surprised there's only 25 betting shops in Luton. There seems to be one everywhere. My main question is, how often are these betting shops monitored or visited?
So as with most of our licensing, well, all of our licensing types, I should say, we have a programme of visits programmed in. The regulatory side, because of the involvement of the Gambling Commission, we undertake joint visits quite frequently. We've arranged operations with them in the past. We are continuing to do that and will continue to do that. But basically, yeah, we go and do sort of regular visits with them. The non-compliance is, well, it's good compliance that we see. So there hasn't been anything significant with regards to the visits that's caused us concerns, given that actually the regulation around these are actually quite high. But we have picked up some elements in the past and looked to resolve those. So they're not, you know, it's not something that we ignore because we believe there's good compliance out there. We do undertake those visits to check and make sure that they are compliant. The issues that we have more around is around the permit side. So where gaming machines are located in other types of premises, that has a higher concern for us with regards to underage use. So actually we'll be looking to do a project specifically around that, and that will probably then tie into the gambling harms assessment going forward.
Councillor Shaw.
A little bit further, what he asked earlier. We talked about possible grounds for objection, but on page 24-25, you've got at least 4 grounds there we could use on any betting establishment or gaming establishment in the town centre. I mean, one of the, you know, we might as well say it here, the betting shop just on the ramp there is a regular begging spot for a lot of people. And that would meet at least 4 of these criteria to actually stop that, you know, not grant a licence to that shop. But just coming in now, the one at the bottom of Wellington Street, there must have been a gang of 9, 10 stood outside that shop. With Luton Bid asking us to take action over the town centre, over the begging and the attractions, the town centre's changed an awful lot over the last 3-4 years, because now within 100 yards of here, you've got at least 5 or 6 blocks of emergency accommodation, which is for some of the least well-off, mentally, physically and financially people in the town. All 4 of these criteria would meet that for objections. So it isn't just 1 or 2. My question is, do we work with Luton Bid? How close do we work with the town centre bid? Why haven't we taken action where we can, according to these 4 criteria, about the arcade and the betting shop without mentioning any names on the ramp, which is one of the hot spots for begging in the town centre?
Certainly more than happy to answer that, Councillor. So the issue is, unfortunately, there isn't a renewals process. So it's unlike some of the other elements, say, that we have, that they have to have an annual or a 5-yearly renewal. These licences are issued for the lifetime of the premises. So basically, they pay an annual fee each year. So actually, we are very much reliant on that evidence and complaints coming in for us to then review that. So actually, we don't generally receive complaints with regards to activities linked to gambling establishments. That's just, we just don't get them. We don't know why that particularly is. As I've explained to Councillor Keynes, we will go out and do our own inspections to check compliance. but actually with regards to that link between gambling establishments, begging and street culture, that sort of thing, actually we're not getting those reports. So we're more than happy to look at those if we get those reports, and obviously if officers witness anything, we will look to follow those up. But we're just not getting the reports through from the businesses, from the bid or anybody else at this time. But more than happy to look at that if that information starts to come through to us.
You can walk out of here, you can walk out of here now. There's two blokes sat outside the betting shop and there's a gang of blokes on the corner and we're saying we can't give the evidence. We can walk out and see it with our own eyes now, while we're sat here.
No, I get the issue about the proximity. We would have to have a causational link. So we would need to establish some form of direct link between the gambling activity and the individuals. I say proximity probably is not alone. We would need some other evidence. So if they're coming in and out, if there's activities that are going on that we believe is linked to that premises, we're more than happy to look at that. So not reluctant to do that at all.
The town centre. It was a request of them.
I can shed a bit more light on this. So the bid, you know, they're a partner, we do work with them, but ourselves as a Town Centre Strategic Board, we're setting up a Town Centre task force, basically to look at and use the powers that we do already have. We're not looking to add anything or create anything. Let's really just drive down and enforce what we can enforce. So as part of that, you know, looking at enforcement around the PSPO, begging, street cleansing. And I get Tony's point here, because I don't think that those people begging are then immediately taking that money and going into the gambling shop and spending it in there. We know where they're spending that on. It's likely hard drugs or it's alcohol.
It's not just gambling if you read them for. It's open establishment.
So I was actually going to ask Tony, so if, for example, some of those beggars were going inside the gambling shop and using the toilets, could that be part of them sort of aiding their activities in doing that?
Hang on, one of them is not. First one, page of top 25. The location of any nearby sensitive premises, such as hostels and other facilities used by vulnerable persons, for example, drug and alcohol addictions, where there's a prevalence of street drinking in the area, which may increase the risk of vulnerable people using the premises. I mean, the arcade, whatever you want to call it, bottom of Wellington Street, the three seats what were there, is where they all sit to do the drinking. Yeah, it's, you've got it down here, but it doesn't seem to me as if we're enforcing any of it.
The issue again is coming back to the fact that that's, as you're aware, that's a long established premises. That's been there for, well, as long as I can remember, to be honest. And as I say, there isn't a renewals process, because normally we pick those up through a renewals process like we do with some of the other licence types, that actually you get a fresh application in, which then gets notified to councillors and interested parties, and then we can look at that and review that and see whether there's additional measures necessary. So unlike that scenario, we don't have that with the gambling provisions. It is just an annual fee. The premises owner comes in and pays a licence fee and it continues. So we need that information and that evidence to bring that together, and we can then consider the elements in line with the policy. But as I say, at the moment we're not receiving those, so we'd welcome, you know, obviously if members have concerns and that, please raise that. And if there are members of the community and the businesses that you're working with, again, we would welcome that information so that we can start to build a picture.
To meet that criteria, you said actually our own licensing policy. You've got Nostell Wellington Street, you've got Nostell in King Street, you've got Wesley House in Chapel Street, and you've got Ace up in Castle Street. So every one of those streets leading off the town centre has now got a minimum of one large hostel in it, which is all housing vulnerable people.
Yeah, and I think that then comes back to the discussions about looking at this assessment of gambling harm, because that may be one of a number of addictive elements that are at play within the street culture. So I agree with Councillor Taylor there that actually it does need to be looking at that wider provision with regards to looking at the powers that we have available and looking at across the board, because it may not be that the gambling provisions are the right way forward to try and address that. It may be through other antisocial behaviour powers, etc. But certainly, at the moment, we need a trigger. It's not being witnessed by officers, because as you know, if officers turn out, everybody's on their best behaviour. So actually, we are in need of that information coming in so that we can build the picture and get that causation, but more than happy to do that.
And my last one, can we put in a licence that outside all betting shops, they put an ashtray? The simple reason, it was on Birdsfoot Lane, and outside of, there's no bins there or anything, so it just gets thrown on the floor. Could we include that in a licence somewhere?
Regrettably not, but I think there's probably other provisions that we could look at trying to implement that type of thing.
Okay, Councillor Wynne.
Yes, one question, and then I'd like to follow that up with a suggestion based upon the answer that I get. To what extent do we know what concerns are being expressed by other councils about the issue on gambling and alcohol licences? Do we know what other councils are doing?
Yes, we try and keep abreast of what's going on in other local authority areas. So we do know what's going on. You know, we meet as a Pan Bedfordshire group, so we know particularly what's going on in Central Beds and Bedford. Luton isn't any different in that respect with regards to its approach. We're not missing out on any opportunities in the fact that there are some initiatives or something that is out there that we're not doing. But basically, yes, there are concerns, certainly with hotspots, and a particular hotspot in the town centre is around, members may well be aware, Chapel Street is a particular concern. There is a hotspot just with regards to a whole range of antisocial behaviour and issues in that particular location. And there are a mixture of all different licensed premises within there, from late night refreshment to gambling establishment, alcohol establishments, etc., or like the private hire operators, you name it. There is a significant number of licensed premises all within that location. And part of the work that we are looking to do, but not only locally but also county-wide with the police and partners, is to try and unpick that to improve that situation, because that we do feature one of the top, well, it's one of the top 4 locations across the county with regards to crime and disorder, unfortunately.
Thank you. I understand the reply I've got. It hasn't changed my view. My feeling is, from what's been said at this committee this evening, is that there is a consensus that we need to do something differently. I would like to ask this committee as a whole whether you think we should put in a cross-party motion into full council asking that Newton Borough Council takes an active role in trying to persuade other councils to join us in making some of these licensing regulations more sensible and more in line with today's world.
Okay, I'm just going to move on to Councillor Keynes. Chance the members to agree. Do your members agree with that?
My apologies, I came in very late, but your suggestion is fine, but I think it would be probably better if it was done through the LGA and influence the government to change the legislation rather than just a motion in here in the council, and ask our MPs and lobby them to be able to get so that we have a more influence in changing the legislation rather than just having a motion in the council.
Councillor Hussain, I understand what you've just said. However, when you start talking about organisations like the Local Government Association, unless you do something positively, it won't have any effect at all. Yeah. I think we need to take an initiative.
I'm suggesting it that we can really agree to something between all the political parties here, then ask our two MPs to lobby the government to look at the legislation. It's no use us passing the motion which goes nowhere. Yeah? So that would be up to the full council, asking the two member of parliaments to lobby the government to change the legislation. Without changes in the legislation, whatever you agree here would not mean anything. That's what I'm suggesting. Agree to a motion jointly by all political parties, which can be unanimous from all of us. Yeah?
I'd be more than happy with doing something. All I just think is the conversations that we've had here in this chamber this evening have actually not taken us any further forward. And I think a lot of the points that were, for example, made by Councillor Shaw earlier on are absolutely valid. And I think we need to do something differently, otherwise nothing will change. So if you think that's the right way to do it, then let's give it a try, because I'd like to see us do something positive rather than just having this discussion which didn't seem to be taking us very far.
Yeah.
Yeah,
don't
I do agree with Councillor Mahmood in what he's saying. There's no point in having a motion that's not going to take us nowhere. It's better just to change the legislation. Yep. Okay, it was Councillor Keane. Did you have a question?
I'm going to bring it down live now. For my own information, really, who or what are the Luton Borough Safeguarding and Quality Assurance Team, and where are they?
To be honest, it caught me by surprise on that one. I must admit, I've looked at. We will need to cross-reference, so we have gone out to everybody on that list. We'd have to look at identifying who it was that we sent it to. No, we're not making them up. No, it's the titles, isn't it? The title might not be quite as it stands now, but I will certainly find out for you and make sure you know who we sent it to. Yeah. As you know, the titles for different departments change quite regularly, so we'll cross-reference and we'll let you know. That's no problem at all.
Rest assured, Terry, it's not going to be made up. No. Councillor James Taylor.
Just very briefly, just wanted to see if, Tony, you were aware of that town centre task force and if any invitation had been extended to someone from licensing to be represented on it. And if not, I'll make sure they do.
Yes, I'm aware that, not only the task force, but I also believe there is a nighttime economy task and finish group that's being proposed as well. So we're keen to be actively involved with both of those initiatives. So
Forthcoming, yes.
Councillor Shaw.
The team in education, public health and children's services, where you get safeguarding referrals made by the public or council officers or teachers or nurses or doctors to have, when they've got concerns about the way someone's behaving or the mental health capacity of someone, and they're supposed to put a safeguarding report and a system into place for them to be interviewed, looked at, see what help they need. That's what the safeguarding team is.
Does that answer your question, Terry? Councillor Mahmood.
Yeah. Terry is an independent safeguarding board for the adults and the children. So they are the one that have a statutory responsibility if it is any premises license or anything else. It's just not just for one part, it's for the two. And there are two safeguarding independent boards which investigate as well as protect the children and the adults.
Does that answer your question? Thank you. Is there any more questions or any more comments? Okay, so the recommendations, the Licensing Committee is recommended to 1, note the responses received in relation to the consultation carried out. 2, note the changes made to the current statement of gambling policy for the next 3 years. And 3, agree any changes further to the responses and any comments from the committee. Is that all agreed? Yep. Yeah, if we all agree on that as well. Yeah. Yep. Cross-party, absolutely. Great, perfect, thank you.
Sorry, I just need a bit of clarity on that resolution. So this is a motion that will be going to full council. It's not a reference coming from this committee. Is that correct? This is going to be done cross-party?
Yes.
It's not going to be a report or reference from this committee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it's between the political parties?
Between the political parties to go
Okay.
and take it into full council.
Okay.
So it's going to be...
And that is the review of the current impact assessment. Yeah? And that's you, Tony, again, isn't it? Or which one of you?
It is. You get me all evening this evening, Chair, so sorry about that. Yes, so if I can proceed. So as members may be aware, we've had a specific cumulative impact assessment carried out separate to the statement of licensing policy for alcohol, regulated entertainment, etc. Since April 2018. Prior to that, we'd actually had a section included within the existing policy, but when the changes were introduced by the Policing and Crime Act 2017, it actually brought cumulative impact assessments into a legal position, and therefore, since then, we've looked to review those key areas of the town with regards to cumulative impact. In effect, this cumulative impact assessment then provides a policy by which the subcommittee can consider when looking at applications for predominantly alcohol premises within the in this case in the town centre, and it shifts the presumption of grant. So under normal circumstances, the presumption is to grant a licence, possibly with conditions. This assessment then shifts the presumption to refusing a licence unless the applicant can demonstrate that there is going to be no additional issues and they're not contributing to the cumulative impact of those types of premises within that identified location. Sort of ties in with the discussions we just had in regards to the town centre task force and all the other elements. So this is in effect another tool in the toolbox. The details are listed there about how we look to publish the cumulative impact assessment. And as at item 7, I've already basically set out that it provides a very strong statement of intent in regards to our approach, and the members have that available to them when considering the applications. And it also enables officers, if we are going to put representations in, to trigger that matter to go before the licensing subcommittee. Let me go back. So just to say that we've looked previously, we've had a community impact assessment for the town centre and Hightown. To be fair, that the assessment for Hightown has not been used in the last 3 years in any way, and therefore we don't have any data to support. So there has to be a whole range of data to support the implementation of a community impact assessment. Unfortunately, therefore, we then can't take that forward. So the decision was looked to then, obviously the proposal is to remove Hightown from that area, but to extend the area of the town centre coverage to cover part of Central Ward and a proportion of South Ward, and that's detailed in the papers. I think basically that's the end of my report. I think all of the information with regards to the consultation that was carried out, the data that we've looked to draw upon, and then obviously building on the previous cumulative impact. So that, you know, for instance, all of the streets, etc., are laid out at page 84 onwards, and the area is included in the map on page 85. I think one key change is some of the members that may have been on that committee, that was a recent application that drew issue with whether the mall or premises that adjoined the mall were included. We are proposing that we include the mall within the cumulative impact in the same way as it is included for the PSPO, the Public Spaces Protection Order. So that is another change that's proposed. Therefore, that brings me to the end of my presentation. And again, like the previous item, I'm here to take any questions, any queries, and take any comments. Thank you, Chair.
To understand what you said, because the council at the moment is looking to spread into Hightown with the public space protection orders and everything else. Did I just say to take Hightown out of this? Surely it'd be sensible for the council to be doing both at the same time.
Offer a bit like that, Chair.
Yeah.
So due to the lack of issues, so unfortunately we can't have a blanket policy regards to cumulative impact. There has to be data to support the introduction of the community impact area. Therefore, if we're not getting the data, and one of the key issues is we did have data previously, which is why we introduced Hightown into the cumulative impact assessment 3 years ago, but that's not been used. There's been no applications that have been triggered. I don't think there have actually been any applications within the last 3 years, and we're not getting the same data to support that going forward. So unfortunately, without that data, it pretty much limits our coverage with regards to this particular provision. So it doesn't mean to say that other elements can't be considered, like public space protection orders, but with regards to licensed premises and looking at the cumulative impact of licensed premises within Hightown, then unfortunately we haven't got the data to support that, and without that data we can be challenged, and well, we will be challenged if we try to apply that presumption not to grant a licence based on a policy that has no data to support that.
So the PSPO is up and running in Hightown and being enforced. It's there, it's being done. I think the point around this licensing is it's to do with the licensing of new shops. And I think any problems we do have in Hightown are related to shops that are already there and existing, and maybe bending their licence by selling those high-strength alcohols in single cans or stocking them in the first place. So I think we could already deal with them under their existing licence policy. As you said, there's not a proliferation of new shops coming into the area, which is what this policy would address. It's to do with making sure we nail down and enforce the policies and the licences that are there. So working hand in hand with the PSPO, which has had a tangible effect already. We've seen them moved off the square where we had a lot of complaints. We're talking with business owners. It's just, I think, now gathering the evidence base on those shops which are contributing to that antisocial behaviour as well.
Put the mic on.
Sorry, I'd have just thought one sensible, if we've got the evidence for the public space protection order, which we've had to gather, to extend the public space protection order, we've had to gather that. Are you saying it's a different type of evidence from what you need?
Basically, again, it comes back to correlation. So the data that we've got back for the PSPO doesn't... No, we work together, but the data doesn't support with regards to licensed premises. Unfortunately, we can't just have a blanket rule. The idea behind cumulative impact assessments is that they will change and flex during, every 3 years or sooner. I mean, if hopefully, obviously, the provisions with the PSPO within Hightown work, and they sound like they are already. But again, if we then start to get information through that there is a link between that and licensed premises, either new applications coming in, then we can look to review and bring in a provision with regards to cumulative impact assessment for Hightown in its own right, which is basically what we did last time. But without that data, the policy is useless, and we don't have that data to demonstrate that actually the types of antisocial behaviour that's been reported for the introduction of the PSPO in Hightown supports that for a community of impact assessment. And I can only go on the data that's presented, I'm afraid, Councillor.
Understand that, because if you haven't got the evidence, it's just having the policy for the sake of the policy, isn't it? For 3 years you haven't had any. Right, Councillor Stevens, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question is not about why we're taking Hightown out, but why we haven't included part of London Road into the impact assessment. In the last few years, if you go from the roundabout up towards Hibbert Street, there's probably about 3 food shops that have opened up, which I think all probably have alcohol. The garage has alcohol, there's a pub there. There is daily begging around, which primarily is from drug users, but also alcohol users, around the traffic lights at near to Hibbert Street. Drinking and drug taking goes on regularly around Stockwood Crescent. There's for people vulnerable, drug users and alcohol users, there's the Hub, which is in London Road. In Arthur Street, you've got the same. There's another hostel for vulnerable alcohol drug users. So I don't quite understand why we haven't included at least up to Stockwood Crescent from the roundabout into the impact assessment.
And I'm more than happy to answer that. Again, it comes down to evidence. At the moment, we don't have the correlation or the evidence to suggest that it's the cumulative impact of those premises in that area are actually causing that issue. You talked about the petrol station, etc., and the begging in that area. Again,
Sorry. Finish, and then you can come back.
Yeah, again, it comes down to those elements that are being reported to us. So again, through the consultation, that area wasn't highlighted, and we're not getting any other data to suggest that. Hence, why we've drawn the boundary as it is. If you have data that we can draw upon to evidence that, and it comes back to the same rationale in regards to Hightown, then again, we're more than happy to look at that.
I believe you can get that evidence from the police who regularly patrol in that area. I've been on 2 high visibility action days with them around Stockwood Crescent. It is a known drug area. Dealing goes on behind the driveways, behind some of the blocks in Stockwood Crescent. I would suggest to you that maybe the officers have a word with the police and even drive up London Road themselves to see the begging that's going on at the traffic lights. It's dangerous. I feel sorry for the guys actually doing it because it's so dangerous. They're walking up along busy oncoming traffic to try and get money. I would counsel you and the officers to actually to take some further assessment into what goes on in that area.
More than happy to do that, Councillor. What I would say is it's the activities that are this is to do with new and variation applications for licensed premises. And whilst I'm not saying that there is a boundary by which antisocial behaviour suddenly doesn't then get linked back to a premises, but actually this is to do with the location of the premises rather than the antisocial behaviour, for instance, Stockwood Crescent. So actually the concern here is how we look to manage applications either for grant or variation within the denoted area. It doesn't mean that if, for instance, an application was received for Stockwood Crescent, for instance, and I'm not expecting that would be the case, that the council couldn't still consider that given the antisocial behaviour and the issues that are present in that area. What we're looking at is, by very definition, and I don't mean to stress this, but basically it is the cumulative impact of having a large number of premises in a very defined area. It doesn't change the council's powers regards to the other areas outside of that.
I did mention that a number of food premises, which I believe are all selling alcohol, they've opened up in the last 2 years. In addition to, there's nothing to stop further ones opening. That is my fear, and that's why I'm making that suggestion to you.
More than happy to review that. I will speak to my police colleagues. Obviously, they were instrumental into helping us draw up the boundary, but certainly happy to look at that again.
Thank you.
Okay, you're happy with that? I know you brought it up before on that when we were talking about public protection areas, and you brought that up. I remember that you brought that up. So I think we need to get the evidence and also the complaints from the residents, and perhaps you can ask your constituents that if they are have serious issues, and I do understand the begging going on in that part in Castle Street, just by the traffic lights, and it is very dangerous because once or twice they walked in front of my car, even when the lights turned green, so I had to stop right in the middle of it, and it is pretty dangerous, and he doesn't even look when he's walking around. He walks just in the middle of the road and hopes everybody stops when he's doing that. So I think it is something that I think, Tony, that needs to be looked at, particularly the begging that goes on in that particular, on the corner of Hibber Street, those traffic lights we're talking about.
No, thank you, Chair. I think it's, again, coming back to the issues that were sort of presented earlier, it's actually looking at what powers are the most appropriate to deal with that behaviour.
Yeah.
Cumulative impact looks at the premises and the location. I mean, just to sort of put it into context, you've got 144 licensed premises within the area denoted here, 34 of which are alcohol-based premises. So obviously that's quite a considerable cumulative area. But I think, this wouldn't stop begging. So actually, if there are concerns regards to the safety of those individuals and the activities that are going on around the sort of the traffic lights, actually we need to look at the other powers that are available, and it's then looking at the tools in the toolbox to try and address that. Because the introduction, even if we were to introduce a cumulative impact that included that section of London Road, it doesn't give the council any more powers with regards to what we're actually dealing with on the street. It would just mean that if there was another application that came in, or a variation of the existing licence, then that gives us more of a chance to look at that. It doesn't give us additional powers with regards to dealing with that antisocial behaviour per se.
My point, Chair, was quite right what you're suggesting. It's because there have been a number of these shops, quite often the European shops have opened up, but they have alcohol as well. Not trying to stop people having business, but, if there are more and more in the area, I can see it has a similar impact to what you're suggesting for the actual town centre itself.
As I say, more than happy to review that. I will speak to the police licensing team to see if we can evidence that further.
Because I'll tell you, the example I give you, the cumulative impact is when the Tesco wanted to open in that pub, that come to the licence committee and we rejected. They went to the appeal and had a very smart barrister, but he didn't get anywhere because they didn't get their licence to open the Tesco there. So it can be, if you've got a policy and we got the evidence, then you can really put that evidence and we can refuse that. So I think that's what we're looking at. Any other member got any comment? Yes, Terry.
Just a question. Are we only allowed a certain amount of CIAs in an area?
No, there's no limitation. So again, as sort of mentioned earlier, if there were other areas that had particular issues that we could actually evidence cumulative impact of licensed premises in that area, then that could be looked at. It's not the reserve of the town centre or any other, and there's no limit. It's a bit like the PSPOs. There's no limit on the numbers that you can have within a borough.
Right, working on that then, I'm just wondering why you've taken Hightown out of it.
Coming back to the point that we have to have the evidence to support the introduction of such a scheme.
If you think it's working, why take it away?
The issue is that the legislation is quite clear that if we don't have the evidence to support, the idea is that the cumulative impact assessments look to resolve an issue in an area. So actually once you've resolved, or it's been a contributory factor to resolving issues with an area, you wouldn't then keep it in place. So actually it's designed to flex. It's not a blanket provision. So it's designed in the legislation for that very purpose, that actually you look to flex and move to the areas of most concern across, if you think it's appropriate. Lots of authorities have moved away from cumulative impact entirely.
Can I ask that you re-look at Hightown? Because I live there and I know there is problems. According to your report, there isn't any, but I'm sorry, there is.
I think it's that distinction and differentiation, maybe issues to do with antisocial behaviour, but is it linked to the licensed premises? And again, we need that causational link. So actually, PSPO might be the most appropriate measure. If there is a specific issue to do with the activities of the licensed premises in that area causing antisocial behaviour, then cumulative impact might be the way to go. But as I say, we've not used that power for the last 3 years. And the last thing we want to do, as the chair's mentioned, is obviously to shoot ourselves in the foot, really, with regards to having almost a blanket policy, which then can be undermined on challenge. Because actually, you know, it limits activity within, you know, sort of economic activity in that area as well. But if we have no evidence to support the introduction of that scheme for that area that's linked to that type of premises, then we can't shift that presumption. Doesn't mean to say we can't deal with those premises in the normal way as you do when you sit as a subcommittee. You know, if we have concerns, then we don't think that premise is going to be particularly well run, or there are particular issues linked to that premises, then by all means we can trigger that, and that can go to a committee hearing, subcommittee hearing. Doesn't change that power, but what this does is change the presumption to refuse from to grant. So it lays out that we have all of that evidence before you get to the hearing, whereas in normal circumstances you'd be looking for representations to provide that information. It just shifts your starting point for your deliberations as a subcommittee.
Yeah, Councillor Jim Taylor.
Just to contribute to this discussion, so I think when this came to policy group, myself and the other ward councillor, we had the very same apprehension about this, sort of thinking, you know, we need policies in place to protect it, but the problems in Hightown, they're mainly not in relation to licensed premises. They're certainly not in relation to any of the pubs or the clubs, so bricklayers, painters, gardeners, or the Oxon Road Club. Definitely not the bricklayers. Quality establishment, the bricklayers. If there are any issues, it's to do with those long-established off licences that are around there, and I probably do have evidence I could submit to Tony, particularly around one of those, which I will send on. But I think the PSPO is the way to go to do that. Basically, we know the people are only started coming into Hightown because they were being chased out of the town centre by the PSPO. That's where they're coming from. They're not originating from within Hightown itself. It's displacement from the town centre. And so we're trying to deal with that with the expansion of the PSPO, and not just to cover that particular area where they were congregating, but to cover a wider area as well. So it simply doesn't just move them on to another bit of Hightown. People's Park, for example, we've made sure that's covered. I understand the apprehensions, and sometimes 2 and 2 doesn't look like it makes 4 when it works, and sometimes it does. But as a ward councillor, I'm happy with the approach taken, and I do want to see some increased actions taken against some of those established premises which are maybe contributing to those problems by, and I've got a particular bugbear about, is selling those real high strength 8-9% lagers, selling them in single cans, things like that. Those lagers, they're there for one purpose only. That's people with dependency issues to get the most amount of alcohol for the smallest amount of price, and I don't think that's conducive for any licensee to be selling. So I think there's probably something discussed we have about a town-wide policy around those high-strength lagers, but that's probably not for right now. I understand everyone concerned around that community impact assessment, but it's getting the powers in the legislation right for our problems that we have, and I think we've got that with the PSPO now. Thank you.
Chair, if I may, just to respond to that, and thank you, Councillor, for that response. It doesn't obviously remove the provisions for review, so if there's a particular premises that is causing a problem, we have the powers of review, and that's from the licensing authority, the police, and from residents, so that still exists. And there are other initiatives So Councillor Taylor there mentioned about the high-strength drink. We have implemented a voluntary scheme in regards to reduce the strength in other areas, and we've successfully rolled that out in other areas such as Parktown and Park Street. And again, there are those other options where we can actually look to seek to improve improve compliance or improve the situation in a particular area through those measures. So this isn't the only option available. We have lots of other tools in the toolbox. We talked about that quite a bit this evening, haven't we? We have lots of other things that we can consider to look to address those issues, especially when we're looking at particular premises. Thank you, Chair.
I think I'm just going to remind a member of the licensing committee, because when these things come to you, you have a number of options to do. So it doesn't need to, but you need to have the evidence, to be honest with you. It's not, you just simply can't say we're going to do this and put these conditions, because if there's no evidence, you can't, they can challenge you and go to the magistrate to, challenge that there is no evidence of that. But if there is, members have a number of options to do, not just review, but if they're looking for extended hours. And that, you can really look at that when you're given the extension to the hours of operation. So it's something that members need to keep that in mind. Councillor Stevens?
I'm just a little bit intrigued on page 91, 92. When it talks about noise, is it noise generated generally? Is it noise from street parties or from noisy neighbours? Because it can't be, when you're looking at Park Street, it certainly couldn't be general noise because of the airplanes and things going through. So that figure, and also I would say that in South as well, I'm shocked by the 1% for litter, because judging by the amount of reports that I get and the stuff, and the amount of reports that I send in myself, I cannot believe that it's a 1% figure. I really don't believe that.
As I say, this is the data that's been provided to us. So we can only go on the assessment of the analysis and the, that's been undertaken with regards to that. You're right, noise would have to be linked specifically. It can't just be the aircraft or something like that, because obviously if we have a cumulative impact for aircraft, that would be quite interesting. But no, I mean, certainly this is literally from the data in the assessment, where that data is, where you're reporting it through. It's probably worth having a chat to you afterwards to make sure that actually we're getting the linkages through, so where it's being reported to is actually being picked up from the data that we're looking at. But that is based on the drawing all the data from the various sources that we have through the various databases.
I mean, I'm taking it straight to Clean Streets or to Lawrence Mapp and his team, and either myself or on behalf of the residents. So I know the amount. I could probably, I'm probably overloading him actually with stuff in part, from the area, which is why I'm kind of shocked by the figures.
I think the key thing here is that we believe that there is, even without that, there is enough evidence here to demonstrate that, in our view, as officers, that there is the need to introduce or continue to, a varied cumulative impact assessment for this area.
Recommendation that one is really to make representation and comments, which you've done that. So what we're doing is a green cumulative impact assessment will become a policy. So are we agreeing to a policy? Yeah? Okay. And I think that's about it, isn't it? Yeah?
That's it, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Chair, can I just take, sorry folks, I just want to take another moment of your time. It really is the Tony Island show this evening, isn't it? I'm sorry about that. Whilst you're all together, we're looking at training. Now, the recommendations now coming from the Institute of Licensing and the LGA is that there is a need for mandatory training now for a day. Now, I thought I'd take the opportunity to speak to you. Obviously, a full day's training is probably not feasible for the majority of you. So I'd like to try and get a sort of bit of a steer as to if we are to break, you know, well, firstly, is a day's training problematic? But if it is, then would members like to give a bit of a steer as to if we were to break it up into several sessions?